Hi, my name is Mike Lloyd. I'm the CTO of RedSeal, and my talk here is called Navigating Complexity, A Path Through Too Much Choice. Now, to start into this topic, I want to talk about the state of play in security today. Right? You're going to a conference and looking at a lot of different vendors, thinking about the condition of cybersecurity. And well, if you look at the scoreboard, you can see that the home team are losing. Now, just as a sidebar, I have to make a lot of talks. I have to go find a lot of graphics. Try finding a graphic of a scoreboard with the home team losing. Oddly enough, you'll find on the internet, when you look for graphics of scoreboards, the home team is always winning. Of course, that's because the pictures on the internet are usually from people selling scoreboards, and they really prefer to sell them to home teams who are winning. But I did persevere in this case, and I found a graphic of a home team who was losing. And unfortunately, that is our state of play in cybersecurity today. But why is that? Well, you know, we know there's a convergence of a couple of different challenges. One is that we are short-staffed. I haven't met any security teams in the last couple of years who said, you know, I've been able to hire everybody that I have a position open for. And there's a problem of tool sprawl. We have so many different technologies. And I'm going to talk in more depth about what we can do about tool sprawl and how you can deal with the overwhelming number of different security products that we use. And of course, we're up against some automated and very persistent attackers who will go doorknob twisting on a global scale using amazing search technologies and will punish any weakness that they find. You know, that's what fundamentally makes security defense an unfair game. We have to go and find every loose doorknob, and the attackers only have to find one and they can get in. So that's what really adds up to a situation where we're losing this fight in the scoreboard terms. That's a sports game, but unfortunately there's quite a lot more serious stuff in play in today's cybersecurity world. So for a deeper analogy, I like to think about this picture. So this is a picture, you can probably tell from my accent, this is part of my heritage. It's a picture from the UK from the Second World War of a war room. And of course, in security, we often build a war room. We try and think about how we can integrate together all our data. And I find this picture is very, very helpful. It's sort of my greatest hit in image collections for security, for doing talks like this. And in this picture, you can really find a lot of lessons about how these people ran their security defenses, the challenges that they faced, and how they responded to those. And they're really very similar challenges that we can recognize today. They have challenges like they have an awful lot of sensor data, sometimes some new technology, but it's very confusing and complicated. For example, they just invented radar, brand new sensing technology, just like a lot of our new technologies today. And so, so what do you see in the room here? Do you see a big oscilloscope showing a radar trace? No, you don't. What you see is up around the edges of the room, around the back, you can see people in uniforms, some of them with headphones on or on telephones, and they're dealing with fog of war, all this complex information coming in from the outside world. And it's contradictory and muddy, and we have a lot of the same challenges when we try to sort through our security data. So what do they do with all that data? Well, they synthesize it. They have special security analysts and data analysts in the war here who are trying to analyze all this information to understand what it means, get intelligence out of it. And they feed it down to the women you see around the table at the bottom. Now, these women are not just pushing counters around. They are highly skilled military analysts, and they knew exactly what they were doing. But what they're trying to do is represent all the information that the people connected to the outside are telling them about what's going on out there. But they're arranging it on this table. Now, this is a map of southern England. This is not a map of northern Germany. Remember, these are people who are losing the war that they're fighting, but they managed to achieve great resilience. They were very, very effective at organizing limited resources, short-staffed, with an outgunned by their enemy, and yet they managed to coordinate really well. And that's what these women are doing. They're arranging information on a table so that a guy at the back with a tie that you can see can make a visual decision, can interpret this complicated data about where they have a defensive gap and where do they need to move the Spitfires so they can fight back. So you can really spend a while unpacking this graphic. And I've actually had long conversations with CISOs where we just reason about how these people are organizing the work that they're doing. And this is really what a lot of organizations are struggling to do today. They're trying to integrate all their data feeds, their complex data feeds, into a single way so that you can look at it and make sense out of it and respond effectively to what's going on. And that's what we need to do to deal with the fact that we have some of the same pressures that these people had. We also need to be resilient the way they were. So in our IT environments today, you would think it would all be one big integrated world. I guess this is what the CEO thinks our IT and security infrastructure looks like, one big happy world. But in practice, of course, it's not like that. In the real world, it's a lot more broken out. There are silos. Every organization I meet has silos with distinct things happening in distinct places. So you have a whole bunch of security tech. And at a trade show like this, a lot of what you're learning about is about all the various vendors that we, including us at RedSeal, who make stuff that tries to follow your network, tries to follow what your fabric is doing. But of course, your fabric is changing as well, because we've now got all the cloud migration. And so most businesses are hybrid now, where they have a mix of legacy network and cloud, whether that's public cloud or on-prem virtualization. And all these things are starting to open up gaps in what should be a single integrated picture. So there's a gap of incomplete information. All the security tech that we deploy, it's all wonderful. I mean, there are so many better mousetraps in this world. We'll talk later about the way that there are about 2,000 different security technologies on sale at the moment, 2,000 different vendors with a better mousetrap. And that's a lot, right? But all of them struggle with just even knowing what's out there. It's very, very hard to get a perfect inventory, very, very hard to understand what it is you're chasing with all of your selected products out of the 2,000 things that are on sale. So you have incomplete information. You also just have different worlds, right? There's the endpoint silo, the networking silo, sometimes separate from the network security silo. And the cloud guys, they barely even speak the same language, right? They have their whole DevOps world. They think about things a different way, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you have another gap there that opens up because you need more than one language, even inside one company. You might think you have one company mission and one core application of what you do to serve your customers. But to achieve that, you have these different languages, these different tribes within the organization. And even those tribes, those people, they're struggling with too many interfaces because all that diverse security tech and all the diverse networking and all the diverse cloud stuff, every one of those has a proprietary interface that does things in their own unique way, right? Cloud came along many years ago now, and we've all adopted it, but they reinvent the old ways and they redo everything in new fabrics. Nobody uses SNMP, an old network management protocol, to track the cloud. They've reinvented new ways of telling whether a device is up or down. But that means you've got different languages all in play, all at the same time within your organization. So it really isn't that one big, simple, integrated world. And that's part of why we're losing. That's why it's important that we try and get back there to reintegrate some of these different sources, and so that we can build back up to a more integrated picture. So if I focus down just on the security team, even within the security team, not IT as a whole, you have some of these problems. I talk to a lot of different organizations, and I try to find out how many security products do they use. And I find a range, but somewhere between 15 and 50 is about typical. Now, that's reasonable, right? All those products were purchased for good reason because they have real use cases. I'm not suggesting anybody was ripped off, but that's a lot of different products to understand. Now, when you compare those products with a complicated user interfaces, because they all do complicated things, to the number of people you have to drive them, most people I find have, maybe 20 security products and enough skilled people to operate 3 of them well. And maybe your numbers are a little bit different in your organization. Maybe you have 50 technologies and enough skilled people to run 7 of them well. Well, that's great, but there's still a massive shortfall there where the people and skills that you have to be expert in these technologies don't keep up as we buy more and more of these things to do more and more of the security things that happen. So for a long time, we've been chasing the fact that the bad guys move on. The bad guys keep inventing new ways of attacking us. So we end up with countermeasure of the month. And then we bolt on another security technology, and these things pile up, but they've ultimately outstripped the expertise because we've drained the talent pool, right? I think most organizations now agree you can hang out a sign saying you want to hire a security professional, but good luck. We have drained that talent pool. There are people around, and you can get people to move jobs, but there just aren't enough to go around everywhere. And so just like electrons moving in a wire, right? The security professionals hop around, especially the ones who get ongoing education and continuous certification like you can get at virtual trade shows. So with that limited number of experts and the large number of technologies, we have to make these things integrate more. Now, a lot of my talk here is a little bit pessimistic about that we're not doing that well at stopping the bad guys and that we've got these big challenges in front of us. But I get some optimism from some things like the World War II analogy, where those folks in London really were effective at using the limited resources and fighting back. I'm also optimistic because I've been in this game long enough to realize that vendors have woken up a bit, right? There used to be these fights about who'll be the top pane of glass. Every vendor wanted to say, okay, my technology will be the top pane of glass, the one thing you talk to manage your security. And most vendors have really given that up at this point. And I think that's healthy. I mean, we'd give it up because you, the customers, force us to adapt to your way of looking at things and the way that you want to integrate technologies together. I just want to put out a plea for a second that says, as vendors, we, just like you, face 2,000 other, well, I suppose you look at 2,000 vendors, I look at 1,999, all the other ones. And I can't choose to integrate with all of them, but we as an industry do understand that we have to build more of this integration. And that means vendors will do what you ask them to do, because we need some help figuring out which integrations will be the most effective for you. So that's not really a sales pitch for my product, but it is an important point about where we are as an industry. And so I encourage everybody listening to this to talk to your vendors, even as you're visiting booths at a trade show. You know, one of the things I've encouraged people to do is don't ask, what does your technology do? Ask, what does your technology integrate with? That needs to be the 2020s question. That's how we can put together the jigsaw puzzle that we're trying to deal with here. So, and what that does is it puts vendors under more pressure to build the integrations that you need so that we can deal with the short staffing that we all face, because we're all in the same boat, right? We're all losing this war together. And so we have to cooperate more. And so I do think there's a healthy mindset shift. As an industry, we used to worry a lot more about perfect protection. Those days are gone, and now we've moved on to think more about resilience. And as we think more about resilience and being able to survive the inevitable incidents as they come along, well, you also have to think about how to integrate, right? I think the World War II analogy helps clarify some of that. So, okay, that's nice as a problem statement, but what do you do? Well, I've got a few examples of what you can do about integration, and then I want to talk some about how you can choose to spend limited resources on this complex security technology. But when it comes to integration, there are a couple of very practical things that I've learned to do over the years. One of them is combining data silos. Very frankly, this first example, I learned to do almost as a side effect of what I do in my day job. But what I've learned, just putting in company terms for a second, is every company has data silos. I talked earlier about there's the network ops team, and then there's the endpoint team, the vulnerability management team. There are these teams all over the place. And security teams have a unique pressure to get a complete picture. Only security is obsessed with completeness, because only security teams realize that the bad guys hide in the dark space, right? A NetOps person or an IT admin thinks 99% is good enough. Because if you've got 99% coverage of all your assets, you're really doing an excellent job. You can get a bonus and get on with your life. In security, of course, if we only have 99% of the data, the bad guys will hide in the 1% because they have these automatic search tools that will find wherever they can hang out that we can't see them. So they will gravitate natively, either through skill or through just Darwinian evolution. They'll go and hide in the corners that are unmanaged. So security is uniquely obsessed in the organization. It's the only part of the organization that really needs to think 100%. I need 100% information on what's going on. But that means we can help get towards that by going to each data silo. And everybody knows in security that you go to a data silo and you're expecting it to be garbage. You're expecting low quality data. You're not expecting it to be perfect. But the fact that as security professionals, we compare data silos to each other, that is incredibly valuable. That was something I learned almost by accident. Because what we do at RedSeal is we build up a model. We build up that table that you saw in the war room, right? In the World War II war room, that map where people look at their defensive situation. That's what we do at RedSeal. But that means we have to combine network information with endpoint information. We have to look at routers, firewalls, and load balancers, that view of the world, the NetOps view of the world. We have to combine that with endpoint data, because what we do is attack simulation. So that's how we find out, is your defensive situation weak or is it strong, by attacking an integrated model of your network and your endpoints. But that's all well and good. That's the fancy RedSeal value proposition. But take a step back. That means we have to combine two data silos in the way that I'm talking about. We have to combine networking data with endpoint data. And the first thing we found, no surprise to anybody who's worked in the security space, is when we went to a customer and said, okay, I'll take your vuln scan data, and that's the vuln guy's view of the world, and I take the networking team's view of the world, and I compare them, I get this, right? I get some overlap where my hands line up, but you get quite a lot of the network that doesn't line up at all. There are endpoints that have no network to live in. There are whole chunks of the network that have no hosts in them. What, those were built for fun? No, I don't think so. I think it's that the vuln management guys differ from the NetOps guys in how big your company even is, because nobody has a really great inventory. So as a side effect of that, I honestly got this wrong at first. I thought 10 years ago that, okay, this is a barrier, this is a problem, and we need to just sort of try and reduce the cost of ownership by not focusing so much on the discrepancies in the data. And a couple of CISOs really, hit me with a clue bat and said, no, you don't understand. When you uncover that, you uncover primary security value because of the discrepancies between the data silos. The fact that they don't line up is immensely valuable because inventory is the most important thing. 100% knowledge is the most important thing, getting towards 100%. So what we ended up doing was changing the way our product stages its technology. We lay out a customer journey in multiple phases. And one of those early phases just gets into, look, your data sources are going to disagree with each other. So let's look at that, let's plan for that, and let's go find the discrepancies between your data sources. And this is something you can do. You don't need to use RedSeal to do this. We're very good at it because we had to integrate the data feeds that we want. But if you look at your organization and you're thinking about something practical you could do right now, if you think about data silos, think about the ones that are likely to differ the most and try and combine them and see if you can find the deltas between them. For example, the NetOps team really doesn't think much about endpoints, but the vuln scanner team thinks only about endpoints. And so those are quite different perspectives on the elephant, if you think about the sort of blind men looking at an elephant story. And so if you can combine different perspectives like that, just using Excel, you can find enormous richness in the ways that they disagree with each other, like this chessboard, right? I think of it as trying to combine the chessboard of the NetOps guys with the chess pieces that come from the vuln management guys. Put those two together, and what do you find? Just like this picture, you find chess pieces left over, and you find blank chess squares. And that's really a valuable signal. So that's the kind of integration you can do today to deal with the fact that all these technologies are out of sync with each other, and to help converge them, because it's really uniquely security. Even though they're not all security tools, it's security who particularly wants them to be integrated. So then there's cloud, and cloud is another challenge along the same lines. It's something that is less integrated than most of us security professionals would like. Every network I find is hybrid now, right? From an IT point of view, virtualization came along, and that was great, and then we invented cloud computing, and now everybody's adopted cloud computing, at least for a chunk of the workloads. But this means, from a security point of view, we now have an apple orange, because these two things really are different. They're not managed the same way, they're not spoken about the same way, the interfaces are different in how you manage them. Yeah, they both do compute, but a Lambda service from an outsourced provider is very, very different from a legacy mainframe or application in a data center. And life would be easy if we could just say, okay, let's adopt the new world and go do everything the new way. Except that's not reality. What's reality is you keep some of the old legacy network, at least the way the cloud guys see it, they see it as legacy network, and you adopt some of the new. And every security team who's trying to deal with the diversity inside their organization knows that, yeah, all the old stuff still sticks around with all the old risks that it had, and then this new stuff comes along and it's pitched as, oh, it solves all those old problems. Maybe it does. Maybe it means that some of the old mistakes can't be made, but brand new mistakes can be made in these brand new ways. And now you've got all the risks of both. And so you have to have some way to put it all together. I don't really have time to talk in depth about pets and cattle, but the pets and cattle conversation is really an illustration of why the DevOps guys, the cloud guys, think differently than legacy data center folks. I've recorded a podcast about this. So if you go to redseal.net and look for Lloyd versus Lloyd, my name is Lloyd. We also have a federal CTO whose name is Lloyd, and we record these podcasts. And we've put one up recently just going into depth on the pets and cattle change in mindset that comes from cloud. But very, very briefly here, pets and cattle is the idea that all computers used to be pets, things we give names to, we give them a lot of care, we take them to the vet if they're hurt. Whereas in cloud, you think about compute as cattle. They're all interchangeable, just like the cow on the picture here, just a number tag on their ear. And frankly, if they get ill, you shoot them and get another one. That's how cloud computing works. It's very, very easy to replace equipment. And this has some, in theory, has some great benefits for security. It means you think about patching differently because you're no longer trying to apply a patch to your cattle. You just get rid of that cattle and replace them because you can. And that doesn't really work very well with pets. The trick is, here again, if you could convert to a world of all cattle, then we could use security methods and paradigms that work in a world of cattle. But that's not how the world is. Even the bright DevOps folks who talk about pets and cattle, it's not or, it's pets and cattle. That most organizations have some of both. You do actually still have some pets, some very precious resources that you do not treat like cattle. You do not treat as disposable. The trick is to know the difference, when to treat something like it's a pet and when to treat it like it's cattle. So as security professionals, we really have to do both of these. But it still comes down to the basics. You still need to know, where are my assets and do I have any databases exposed to the internet, right? That's one of the new mistakes, the classic mistake of the world exposed S3 bucket. So we move from an old world to a new world, except we keep a foot in both camps and we inherit the weaknesses of both, and we have to have some way to integrate all this together. And that is challenging. Now, it's gotten even more challenging under the pressure of the tool sprawl. That's, as I mentioned before, there are so many technologies, so many different technical challenges that you need to meet, right? These technologies exist because they really do things. It's not snake oil. These things really do help, but you can't run all 2,000 of them. You can't even keep enough staff to run the ones you've probably bought. And so recently I've been finding more and more organizations trying to rationalize, trying to stop renewals on some of the bottom of their to-do list. Maybe they have 20 products and they sort them by priority, and they only renew the top 10, and the bottom 10, that was nice. It was good technology, but we didn't have the skills to keep it up, so we don't keep it up. And let's be realistic. If that's the right way to respond in a World War II bunker mentality where we really have to limit our resources and spend carefully, that means we now have to choose what's really essential. We have to be able to boil down security investments and understand which ones matter. And that's the last point I want to cover here is, after thinking about integration a little bit, well, how do we figure out what do we integrate? What are the real essentials in security? So to talk about that, I want to take an idea that actually the US Air Force came up with. This is, they were studying who wins dogfights. And they came up with an idiom that they call the OODA loop. And if you're in the military, you've probably heard about this, but many civilian folks have not. It's a really good thought process that gets into this question of, do you find that when you study dogfights, does the fight go to the guy with the better plane, the faster plane with the bigger guns? You would think yes, but really no, that's not how it works. What they found was it's really down to the mental capacity of the pilot, and it's particularly how fast can they get around this loop of 4 operations. You can see them in the picture here: observe, orient, decide, act. Now, we could spend a while talking about how that works in dogfights, but you can get the basics of, you got to know what the other plane is doing, you got to figure out what that means in your context. Got to know which way up your plane is, for example, either you're upside down or right side up. You got to decide what you're going to do, and then you got to act, and then you got to go back and do it again. And that's what dogfights are like. Well, anybody who does security incident response will recognize these ideas. You got to observe the bad guy. You got to figure out what they're doing and what it means in your context, because an IP address is not a business value statement. You got to decide what you're going to do. You got to act, and then you got to go back and do it again. And that loop, if you neglect any step in that loop, you're going to lose. Okay, so this is a good military framework, but my claim is this works very, very well to explain how you need to prioritize your cybersecurity investments. You have to make sure that you do all 4 of these, don't skimp on any one of them, and how can you make it around the loop faster? And that might require some automation, that might require vendor integrations, but you need to choose which vendor integrations you invest in based on thinking about this loop. Because I think most folks can recognize, observe. Every security company that I meet, every security team at a company, they have tons of facts. They've invested a lot of money in sensors, that's vuln scanners, endpoint agents, all kinds of observed technologies. And what happens is, as soon as you observe all this data, you drown in data. Everybody has that problem. And of course, as an industry, almost 20 years ago now, we reacted to that with the decide stuff. That's where I put SIEM, where we try to take in this vast amount of data and try and write these magical correlation rules that will just tell us, the root cause was this, therefore you should act in the following way. So that's the decide and act part. SIEM has gotten cornered down now into just the decide piece, and SOAR is starting to take off, so to speak, for ACT. We're trying to get better and better at automating the actions in workflows. So we've got a ton of investment in observe and decide and act. Sensors, SIEM systems, and SOAR systems for those three areas. But where's all the orient? Where are the technologies that really help you map what a given event means to you? The Air Force would say, if you're not doing orient, you're missing the most important thing. That was the biggest red circle in that Air Force version of the diagram. That orient is the most important discipline of the four, and it's the one we don't invest in enough in security. It's where I focus, it's where RedSeal focuses. We are the map makers in that World War II analogy. Speaking of which, I should tie this up. So if you're building your own war room, I suggest this picture is a really good guide to how to do it. And I can even connect it to that OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act. How are these people doing OODA? Well, the observe, of course, is these folks on the outside with headphones who are getting data from the sensors. Orient is what these women are doing, arranging this content on a map. That's mapping it to the context of Southern England. Where are the defensive gaps? Where are the resources? How do we fight back? That's the orient step that most organizations do with human sweat equity today that we really need to apply software to. We need to get better at automatic mapping of what's happening so we can orient faster. Ultimately, of course, so that somebody can decide. And of course, ACT doesn't happen in this room. In this case, it happened out on runways with Spitfires. But that's the OODA loop, this US Air Force methodology applied to a UK Air Force situation. But I think it really explains a lot about how we need to think about rationalizing our security efforts. We need to get good at all four of these, not just one or two. And especially we need more work on orient. So closing it out, my recommendations, integrate the data you've got. Because by the way, among other major benefits, that will teach you about your inventory, and inventory matters. It's the most basic security point. And only security is really focused on a complete inventory. You can map every investment you're making to OODA loop, as I just explained. You can try and pick vendors who integrate the best rather than have the best functionality. Because once you realize we're in this short-staffed situation, you need those connectors more than you need the latest, greatest, James Bond, Dr. No level, defense, because an awful lot of attacks are still very basic, right? What was it Verizon said? Who would shoot a guided missile at an unlocked screen door, right? Attackers use simple attacks because they work. And so we need to get better at the basics of getting around that OODA loop. And we need to learn to visualize our defenses, just the way these people did. This fundamental thing in this room, the center of the room, is visualizing your defenses. So, and that gets back, again, repeating myself, to inventory matters. So I hope that gives you some suggestions of how you could think about the rationalization and integration that we're trying to do these days. If you have any questions or you'd like to discuss any of this, you can certainly go to redseal.net. That's where you can find things like the podcast, Lloyd versus Lloyd, where we talk more about pets and cattle and things like that. We record those from time to time. If you'd like to ask me any questions about all this, I'm Dr. Mike at redseal.net. Feel free to shoot me a note. And thank you for your time. Given that this is a virtual trade show, please don't miss that we also have a RedSeal booth. You can certainly come by and chat with us. We'd love to talk. I'll make my way over there, and we have other folks there, and we're easy to find. So thank you for your time, and we hope to see you in the booth.